So now let's talk about comparing fractions. So let's say someone said, would you rather have 1/4 of a cake? So again, we're splitting it up into 4 pieces, or 1/3 of a cake. So just by looking at it, you might say, well, the 1/3 looks bigger. So yes, the 1/3 is bigger, right? 1/4 is smaller than 1/3. But the most accurate way to know this, because we might not be able to tell, they might be really similar in size. The most accurate way to show this is using something called least common multiple. If you remember this from the beginning of the year, LCM. This will come up when we talk about adding and subtracting fractions. So least common multiple, we list the multiples for the denominators. So the multiples are 4, 8, 12, 16, etc. The multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, 12, etc. You can see that the least common multiple is 12. There's no other common multiple prior to, so least common. So 12. So how do we get 12 on the denominator? So if we multiply the 4 by 3, we get 12, and whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. If we multiply the 3 by 4, we get 12, and whatever we do to the bottom, we do to the top. So now this means that 1/4 is the same thing as 3 over 12, and this means 1/3 is the same thing as 4 over 12. So if we compare 3/12 to 4/12, 4/12 is bigger. So now let's talk about adding and subtracting fractions. Again, in our first example, if you had thirds and you were adding the same fraction over and over, so 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, all you have to do is add the numerators. So we have 1/3 plus 1/3, which is 2/3, plus another third, which is 3/3. So this whole thing is 3/3. We know that 3 divided by 3 equals 1, which means we have 1 whole here, which makes sense. Right here, again, so we have 1/3 plus 1/3. All we do is add the numerators because the denominators are the same. They're the same size piece. So we have 2/3. But if your denominators are not the same, that's when you have to use what we call least common multiple. So let's say you ate half a slice of cake, and then you ate 1/3 of a slice of cake. How much did you eat altogether? So it's a little hard to tell because the pieces are different sizes. So we have to make these equivalent. So again, we're going to list the multiples of 2, which are 2, 4, 6, etc. The multiples of 3 are 3, 6, 9, etc. I know that the least common multiple between them is 6. So I have to make the 2 into a 6, so I have to multiply it by 3. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. I make the 3 into a 6 by multiplying it by 2, and I do to the same to the top. So now I have, this becomes 3 over 6, and this becomes 2 over 6. So now, because they are the same size piece, I have 3 6 plus 2 6, which just equals 5 6. So how that would look in a picture. So again, if we have 1/2 plus 1/3, remember we got 5 6. So if we split this up into 1/2, and then we split this up into thirds, you can see we have 6 pieces. We ate 1/2, and we also ate 1/3. Remember, if we have 6 pieces, 1/3 means 2 pieces, another third means 2 pieces, and the third means 2 pieces. So 2 pieces are 1/3, and this is the 1/2. So you can see here we have literally 5 out of 6 pieces eaten. So 5 6. The same goes for subtracting. It's literally the same thing. You still use least common multiple. So what if we have a mixed number? If you remember, mixed numbers means we have a whole number and a fraction. So 3.5 is a mixed number. So if we have mixed numbers, we take the whole numbers and we deal with them, and then we deal with the fractions. So if we had 3.5 and we added 5 and 1/3, again, we take the whole numbers and we deal with them first. So we have 3 plus 5, which is 8. Then we take the fractions. If we have 1/2 plus 1/3, Well, that's exactly the question we did in the last slide, right? Again, we make these equivalent. So we're going to multiply this by 3 and multiply this by 2. So we get 3 over 6 plus 2 over 6, which equals 5, 6. So our answer is 8 and 5, 6. The same goes for subtraction, but sometimes you have weird instances with subtraction because your fractions might be too small. And what I mean by that is, let's say we had 4 and 1/2, and we subtracted 2 and 3/4. So I'm saying my fraction is too small because 1/2 is smaller than 3/4. So this is going to result in a negative number, which we don't really like to deal with. So what we're going to do is regroup. So each of these wholes is like 2 over 2. So I'm going to move one of them over here. So I'm going to change this 4 and 1/2, and I'm going to move one whole over here. So this becomes 3 and 3/2. Again, what that looks like as a visual, it's like you're saying you have 4 wholes and 1/2, which is literally the same thing as saying you have 3 wholes and then 1, 2, 3 halves. So it's the same exact thing. So now that we've regrouped it, we can subtract. So we have 3 minus 2. Again, we do the whole numbers first. So that just equals 1. And then we have 3/2 minus 3/4. Remember, we want to make sure the denominators are the same, so they're equivalent. So the least common multiple is 4. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 to make it 4 and do the same to the top. And I don't actually have to do anything to this side because it's already got a 4 as the denominator. So now we have, this becomes 6 over 4 minus 3 over 4, which just equals 3 over 4. So our answer is 1 and 3/4. So what does that look like? Again, I'm going to put our answer here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in a visual. So we had 4 1/2, and we subtracted 2 and 3/4. So if we have, again, 4 wholes and then 1/2. So I'm just going to color these in red to show that's what we have. And again, we subtracted 2 wholes. So I'm going to color these in yellow. We subtracted 2 wholes, so those are gone. And then we subtracted 3/4. So if we split this up into fourths, we have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So how much do we have left here? This means we have a quarter here. This means we have 1 whole, and this means we have 1/2. So let's add these and see if we get the same answer that we got when we did it the traditional way. So we had 1 whole plus 1/4 plus 1/2. So I only have 1 whole number, so it's just a 1. Then I have 1/4 plus 1/2. Again, I have to make these equivalent. So I'm going to see that the least common multiple is 4. So I'm going to make this 2 into a 4 by multiplying it by 2. Then I do the same to the top. So now I have 1/4 plus 2 over 4, which just means 1/4 plus 2/4 equals 3/4. So as you can see, even with the visual, we got the same answer that we initially got.